Welcome to Tell Me More, an all steel podcast where design meets innovation and we explore the limitless potential of the modern workplace.
Welcome to Tell Me More, the podcast from All Stills Doing More series, where we dive deep into the mind shaping today's most compelling design narratives. I'm Kina Ingersoll, and I will be your host. Today, I'm joined by licensed architect trained in lean thinking, Laurel. She is passionate about circularity and systems change in the built environment. Through her consultancy, Loom and Lever, she helps mission-driven organizations embed sustainable practices and drive broader industry transformation. As VP of Engagement at Mindful Materials, Laurel builds partnerships across design firms, contractors, and owners to advance adoption of the Common Materials Framework and promote holistically sustainable materials. Her background as a sustainable design leader, project manager, and architectural representative gives her a well-rounded perspective on how every stakeholder can contribute to a more circular future. Laurel, welcome to All Stills Tell Me More podcast.
Thank you, Kina. I'm honored to be here. Thank you for having me.
So if you don't mind, I'm going to jump in here with possibly a few provocative questions, starting with what originally drew you to merge lean thinking with sustainable and circular design?
Ooh, I love this question. I'm always here for the provocative questions, so thank you. And I would say, yeah, I like this question because I certainly never thought about or intended to merge lean thinking with sustainable and
Mm,
circular design. I think that everyone's path is unique, and what is so fun and special is to see how we all combine our experience, interest, and the concepts we're exposed to and what we latch onto, and merge those things all in our own unique way of viewing the world and approaching design. And so I would say every phase of my career has had some learnings or frameworks that really stuck with me. And my first architectural job when I was working on getting my license was at a firm that really embraced lean construction methodologies. And so this was kind of
yeah.
out there for me. I had never heard about this. So I'm sure many folks listening haven't either. But this idea around lean construction comes from lean manufacturing. So this originated from Toyota and their manufacturing practices in the 90s. And the core principles and goals of lean are to eliminate waste, maximize value, really focus on continuous improvement. So, always looking at your processes and thinking about how you can learn from what you're doing and continue to improve that process into the future. Teamwork, collaboration, and respect for people is really at the root of lean principles and concepts, too. So, that was something that was always really attractive to me. And in practice, a lot of this came down to how we would manage projects, how we would time deliverables, and it gave me a lot more insight into how work gets done on a job site, and particularly in larger and more complex jobs that have multiple phases and lots of layered priorities. There were a lot of tools that I took away from that job and that experience, and I ultimately obtained a certification in lean construction management. And I was really pleasantly surprised to find when I moved on to my next firm, they were also kind of using some of these lean tools. So
Amazing.
things like just-in-time delivery, or
Mm,
you've probably seen a lot of agile tools that are used today that kind of say like, what is our backlog? What do we have coming up to do? What are we working on now? And what's done? Like these are tools that really originated from lean. And though the firm that I moved to didn't necessarily call them lean tools, I kind of could recognize them for what they were. And sustainability and circularity then became a core area of focus for me in that next move. So I was working in a firm that did predominantly corporate interiors. That was when you and I first connected, actually. And we had at the time a contract with over 75 different buildings in downtown Boston, where we were the kind of default or on call architecture firm to do all the tenant improvement projects for them. And so, in that role, seeing the frequency of turnover of these
sure.
interior
Right.
spaces and
Yeah.
just, I want to say how kind of blasé we, and not just, I don't mean just our firm, but the industry in general is about just demolition and
Yeah.
white boxing. And, we just assume that we're going to come in and, start with a blank slate. So being able to see firsthand the impacts of that and thinking about this again at the scale that we were operating. This is a firm in business for 55 years with 75 plus towers, right? That we're doing constant renovations in. That volume is massive. And so on one hand, I became really focused on learning more about the materials and the impacts of the materials we were putting into spaces. And then on the other hand, I really started taking a closer look at the materials that were coming out of spaces and where they were going
Mhm,
at the end of their life.
mhm.
So that was, I would say,
I
I
mean,
never
honestly, just as
intentionally,
important, right?
absolutely,
Yeah, I love it. That's great. And I love that it feels like that sort of thinking can translate through a variety of different industries, not just ours.
absolutely.
So, how do you define true sustainability in the context of workplace design beyond just specifying, say, green materials?
Yeah, I suppose I would couch my response here by just saying that, and like full disclosure, I've had the title of sustainable design leader.
Mhm,
Sustainable is a word that gets
mhm,
thrown
mhm.
around so much,
Right.
and I almost feel just on the since we're having provocative questions and discussion here, I almost feel like sustainability is a word that has kind of lost a lot of its
Yes,
value, and
actually, I
so
agree.
it's become so diluted and there's no clear consensus on I'm doing air quotes here, but what sustainable is. And there's just so much greenwashing out there. So,
Mhm,
with that said, I would say
mhm.
that, designing for purpose and also acknowledging that the purpose and the function and the use of the space is going to change. So thinking about a flexible space, designing for adaptability, understanding that there's going to be a change in uses over time, that there are different working styles for different occupants, different spatial preferences. But I do really want to hone in on the question about materials because this has been a huge focus for me in recent years. And certainly through my work with mindful materials. So, I just want to share a little insight to the way that I think about materials when approaching a finished palette or a design exercise and offer a tool that everybody can take away to kind of dive into a little further. So, we're talking about circularity a lot, one of my favorite topics. One of the things that I'm always thinking about is what materials are already there that we can work with, right? But beyond that, if we're looking at new materials, and this is the tool that I'll offer from Mindful Materials, is what's called the Common Materials Framework. So this is a framework that looks at hundreds of different existing certifications, eco labels, standards for products, many, I would say all of which designers are familiar with. They see them on products, they see them on packaging, they see them on manufacturers' websites, right? But we often, speaking of greenwashing, it's often hard to know what does it really mean when I see this or that certification on a product. And
Right.
so the Common Materials Framework is a tool that really filters, if you will, or structures the myriad certifications that are out there by impact. And so when I'm approaching a design, I'm really thinking about what are the impacts that I'm going to have not only on the occupants, but on the people who are impacted throughout the supply chain of those materials. So being able to understand which certifications are addressing just the occupants, so things that are looking like VOCs and off gassing, right? That's going to be more relevant to the occupants in the space versus things that are addressing supply chain or circularity, end of life, right? These things are no less impactful, but it's less the impact on the occupants that I'm thinking of and more the impact throughout the full life cycle of that product.
And is there one element that you feel like is most important to you that you look for and make sure that it doesn't have, X in it or definitely has Y in it?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say that one of so to go back to the common materials
Yeah.
framework, it's a hierarchical structure. There's 5 impact areas: human health, climate
Mhm.
health, ecosystem health, social health and equity, and circular economy. And so across all of those impact areas, and there's sub impact areas within that, it's fairly complex, but in all of these areas are a bit of a spectrum in terms of the information we have available about the product. And at the very beginning or at the very base level is transparency. And so
Sure.
that is something
Yeah.
that I would
What
say
do you
that
look
I
for?
am
Yeah.
always looking for.
Okay. Yeah.
Um, and so if there's no transparency, then
Mhm.
frankly, I'm going to ask for it. I'm going to ask, hey, where's this product
Mhm.
made? What's in it? I'm
Mhm.
going to
Mhm.
ask those questions of a manufacturer.
Mhm.
But that's really going to be something that's going to turn me off from selecting a product. If there's no information about the chemical contents, how it's manufactured, where it's manufactured, what its end of life is. Embodied carbon is a huge one, and we're seeing more and more products with environmental product declarations or EPDs. So that's something that, I always will ask for from any manufacturer.
If they're not sort of showing all of that, it's, raises a bunch of red flags as, okay, why are you hiding this from us? Like, what's actually in.
Yeah.
Okay, so what mindset shifts do you think our industry needs most to move towards circularity?
I love that you asked mindset shift because I think this
Mhm.
is so at the root of everything,
Yeah.
right?
Yes.
And oh goodness, could go on about this forever. So I think the one simple thing I would offer is like, and this isn't just in design or just in our industry, I'm going to say for literally everyone and in your personal life,
Uh,
we have to stop thinking that there's a way. We just, again, when we approach a project with demolition and or even when we say, well, I'm going to throw this away, where's it going to go? This
oh
has
my
been so
gosh, that's so
eye-opening.
true. Yeah, where is
Yeah,
that?
like there is no away. Like we are interconnected people on an interconnected planet in a biosphere that is all connected. And when you throw whatever it is away, I love seeing those videos or memes of like the people that collect all the trash they create for a week or a month or a year and like wear it around. Yeah, that would be my number one mindset shift. And I think we years ago with a group that I was convening around material reuse, we did a little field trip to the material recovery facility or transfer
The away
station in
place?
Boston, the away place. Yes.
Yeah.
And people work there and spend their whole day in this loud, smelly, dirty away place sorting our trash and our waste. And I think, when I was in college, I worked in a restaurant. I think anybody that dines at restaurants should have to work at a restaurant at some point to understand and have a little empathy for the service staff. In the same way, I think
Right.
that
Yeah.
everyone who designs the space should be having to visit the material recovery facility to understand where the materials that they're it's easy for us. It's just you're on a computer screen, you're just clicking,
Mhm.
nope, that's going to be demoed, that's going to be demoed. It's easy for us to feel disconnected, but I
Right.
think remembering, and this is, I think, frankly, at the root of all of our problems in the world is this illusion of separation and thinking that, things are apart from us or separate from us
Mhm.
and that this decision doesn't necessarily affect me and I'm going to move on with my life. But yeah, I think when we start to approach construction details, materials, assemblies, you'll approach them in a different way if you're thinking about that end of life.
Thanks for sharing that. I actually agree. I probably similarly need to go to an away space and check that out. So what are some of the most common forms of waste that you see in the design and manufacturing process, and how can we address them? I don't know if we can address them, but maybe you can give
Mm.
a little bit of insight into a possible solution there.
Yeah, I believe that we have all of the technologies and all of the solutions that we need to solve a lot of these problems, but we need to take a little bit of a different approach in how we make the decisions that we do. Like there's a lot of, we live in an economy that is a lot of the real impacts that I'm talking about on ecosystems and people, they're just externalities. They're not accounted for in the budget sheet. And at
Yeah.
the end of the day, when decisions are made, and I'm sure so many people listening have seen this with their clients, you want to choose a healthier product, but because the cost is higher, it gets BE'd, or you end up with, just the way that we usually do it. And so I think that really challenging the status quo and challenging the inertia, just the way that we've always done it, is something that we all kind of have a bit of a responsibility to do. To your question, what are some of the most common forms of waste and how can we address them? I think for
Mhm.
manufacturers, I would say it's the norm right now that products don't have an end of life. Like most of our economy, most manufacturing is built on this very linear supply chain. And we say make, waste. At the end of its life, it goes to the landfill, it goes away,
Right.
and that's that. And so really understanding what is the process of recovering a material or a product, getting it back to either the manufacturer for remanufacture
Mhm.
or getting it back to another organization that's going to recycle or downcycle or give some other end of life for that product or material other than going to landfill is really where we need to be focusing. And there, like I said, the majority of products, the infrastructure doesn't exist, the demand isn't there, right? It's not common that products have a defined end of life that's not landfill. But there are absolutely product categories and manufacturers who are investing in that. There are different ways of even approaching business, like thinking about products as a service, which is a really innovative and provocative way to think about how what our relationship is with the materials and the products and the furniture that we purchase, right? So yeah, I think really taking a critical eye to that product life cycle and working with manufacturers and asking the question, if they're not hearing the question, hey, what's going to happen at the end of this product's life? They're not incentivized in any way to investigate that or spend money on trying to come up with a solution when the market isn't showing that it's even a problem.
And possibly one of the obstacles there is that we need to disassemble that piece of furniture or whatever it is, that element. And if they can't be disassembled because they're, been adhered to through different fusing, it's really hard to recycle things or, disassemble them so that they can get recycled or upcycled. So next question. How do you evaluate whether a material or product truly supports circularity versus simply appearing sustainable?
Yeah, excellent question. I mean, I think you just kind of hit on a great point. Like, how is the product assembled? Is it
Mhm.
or is it a composite product that the materials can't be separated and recycled, right? The other big piece is that, when we're talking about commercial scale design, we're not really going to be dealing with mom and pop processing facilities. Like, we need the infrastructure and the processes and the all the different players in the system to be on board and familiar with the process and willing to maybe do things differently than they've always done, to initiate or engage in a manufacturer return or take back program. So that's one thing that I would say is, when you see something that says recyclable, and this is again point point carries for your personal life too, right? When you see that recycle symbol, that little chasing arrow symbol on a product, there's a little number in there. And do you know what your regional or municipal recycling facility can recycle? There's
Yeah.
ways to find this out, right? But it's easier for us, and we tend to just look and say, oh, recyclable, let me throw it in the recycling. But I'm sure many have heard this term wish cycling, which is like when you kind of wish for the best and throw things into the recycling, even though you're not positive if your facility can take it, right? And so what that results in then is likely that whole load being just diverted to the trash because it's now commingled with things that can't be recycled. And so in a similar way, when we're designing projects and when we see materials that say that the material is recyclable, it's important to understand, is there infrastructure where this product is going to be used for it to then be recycled down the line when the project comes up for demolition, which it inevitably will.
So it almost sounds like it's better if you don't know to put it in the trash rather than in the recycle bin so you don't contaminate,
There's Yeah,
the
it's a quick Google search, but there's a number of different platforms, apps, different things that you can look to say, what's recyclable in my region? And it's worth
Mhm.
looking into that because, we throw away trash every day
Yeah. Yeah.
away,
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah.
like I think it's in
It
the
is
same
part of
way
our
when we
routine, right?
it
Yeah.
is. And in the
Mhm.
same way as we
Yeah.
think about, a mindset shift and how do we approach the design process differently, it's like, I know we're talking about circularity, but in a similar vein, like if a material has toxic chemical ingredients in it, do we want to continue to recycle that and keep using it? Probably
Right.
not.
Right. Right.
So, it's really a mindset shift and thinking, kind of expanding the boundaries of our scope, which I'm sure people are kind of cringing a little bit as we think about that because it's like as designers, we already have so many things that we have to keep track of and coordinate and make sure that they're all working together. And, I'm here saying add this whole life cycle of the material to your list. And I know that can feel very overwhelming, but it's also very empowering to know that as designers, our decisions, our selections, our specifications have such an outsized impact.
Mhm.
And we really have a responsibility to learn more about what that impact is and take the next right action or take the next, well-informed decision that we can, and then share what we learned and then build on what we learned.
Agreed, 100%. So what innovations in materials or manufacturing excite you the most right now?
Mm. I am super excited about all of the kind of bio-based materials that are being
Yeah.
developed. I think,
Okay.
to the extent that we can get away from extracting raw materials and processing them and,
Mhm.
particularly those that then become composite materials that don't have an end of life,
Mm.
this idea of being able to kind of grow a product from mycelium or have something that's going to be home compostable, right, is phenomenal. And I think that's really the direction that we're gonna see things go. And the other piece I would say is, um, there are a lot of certainly abroad or internationally, but more states in the United States now are looking at EPR or extended producer responsibility laws. And this is going to, I think, apply initially more to things like packaging. But as a consumer, again, you might start to see more sustainable packaging, less plastic, more recyclable or bio based options for packaging. And the amount of packaging materials, I don't know how often folks are walking job sites, but the amount of packaging materials for the construction products and certainly
Sure.
furniture, I mean, it's massive, right?
Mm.
So I think having some regulations and requirements around that type of material, which again isn't the end use material that you're seeing, you probably are never going to see the packaging that all of the furniture comes in, but there's a lot of it and it has an impact. So that's the other piece that I think is inspiring or exciting to me to see where that's going to go.
Yeah, you're right. The everything comes wrapped in something, um, to keep it sort of whole and safe and undamaged. So, for designers, what's the best way to engage manufacturers early in the process to engage materials and system support, with circular outcomes?
In all cases, I think approaching the relationship with your rep or with the contact that you're working with as just that, a relationship that you value. The manufacturer often has great expertise to offer to you as a designer to help you understand how best to use their product, what's the best application, what's the best configuration, all of that. And I would say that in general in our industry, I think we have great relationships with our reps and with the folks that the product manufacturers that we work with. Asking the question just to start is as early on as you can, right? Even before you have a project potentially. Like the next time that you're at lunch with your rep or the next time someone's in your office, like asking them, hey, do you have transparency information for your products? This is something that we're really starting to look into and require. Or, hey, what's the end of life? And you'll see this even for samples. This is something that's, such a
Oh,
tangible
so
challenge
there's a lot of
for so
samples
many
getting around.
designers,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Yeah, it's like a constant, like I know many firms that have a materials librarian who just dealing with these samples and
Yeah.
managing the samples in the library is
Mhm.
their full-time job.
Mhm.
So just again, like starting the conversation, asking the questions early, and the more I've found, at least for me, the more questions you ask, the more questions you're going to have. So
Yes.
just
Yeah.
also approaching it as like, hey, I'm not trying to shame you if you don't have an EPD or even if you don't know what an EPD is,
Mhm.
right? It's an opportunity for education. It's an opportunity to learn more. And, you said something earlier like, oh, well, if you're not going to tell me what's in it, what are you hiding?
Yeah.
That it's often that's not the case, that there's like intentional greenwashing, but it's more often that again the demand hasn't been there, the designers haven't been asking, and so there hasn't been a need or a perceived need to invest in that transparency. And transparency is really just the first step, from the point of understanding what's in the product or how it's manufactured. From there, then you're able to assess the results that you get, commit to improving or optimize by meeting a certain benchmark, like removing red list chemicals or, um, you know, offering a fully closed loop recycled product, things like that.
So we kind of touched on this and the importance of, say, disassembling or being able to disassemble, especially furniture, to be able to recycle and or downcycle or upcycle. But how can we design products and spaces that are not only durable, but also designed for disassembly, repair, or reuse? And I know this is an extremely tough question, but do you have any
Yeah.
ideas here or insights?
Yeah, there's a couple like kind of catchy sayings that
Mm,
touch on this, but designing with the end in mind, I think both for
sure.
designers and for
Yeah.
manufacturers,
Yeah.
right? And that means not only looking at what's the process of actually recycling this textile or, whatever material it is, but how are we going to actually get it back from the job site? Like the logistics piece of it and the infrastructure required there is a whole other piece too. So that's one thing I would say. And then the other one, you touched on this a little bit earlier, Kina, but again, when things are fused together, or if there are adhesives that are used, so this is the other kind of catchy saying that gets thrown around a lot is screws, not glues. So if you can use
Mm,
mechanical fasteners as
mm,
opposed to adhesives, and there's a lot of opportunities for designers to just look at your details. Is there a place where you could use a Z clip? Or another type of mechanical fastener as opposed to using an adhesive that's going to probably prevent folks at the end of the project's life from reclaiming, disassembling, or reusing that material.
super helpful. If you could challenge every designer and manufacturer listening to take one actionable step towards circularity, what would it be?
Hmm.
This is also
I'm gonna
tough.
go back to yeah, so I know I just said this, but, like, designing with the end in mind, and I mean that literally, like, when you get done listening to this and you go back to looking at your project, take what you're working on right now and imagine that you are inheriting this project 5 or 10 years from now
Mhm,
as a space that you've been tasked with redesigning or white boxing, right? And what would you be able to save? Are there things that you might
mhm,
be able to
sure.
reuse, relocate, or repurpose? Is
Mhm,
everything going to have to be demolished? Is
mm,
everything super trendy and it's like
right,
very unlikely that it's going to be still trendy 5 or 10 years from now?
right.
Um, I think that it's one of those things that we're often learning about different tools and frameworks and concepts and we think, "Oh, on my next project I'm going to try to implement that." But whatever you're working on right now and whatever phase of the project you're in, like there's probably something, some little tweak that you can do that will improve the end life of that project and those products and materials. And again, then how do you take that lesson learned and carry it forward? So that would be my challenge, I would say. Like, whatever project you're working on right now, what can you do to modify the design or the connections, the details in a way that would enable or make that easier for that material to be repurposed at the end of its life?
I love that. That's actually super helpful. Thanks for sharing. So, we are nearing the end of our discussion. Thank you so much, Laurel, for all your time. So, if you don't mind, I was hoping to end on a philosophical note and ask you, what can we do to connect and inspire our fellow designers and the design community that they are a part of?
Definitely. I love that you said connect. This is a big theme for me. And I
Mhm,
think if you're not already engaged in the design community or in a community of practice or area that you're focused on, like for me, it's been sustainability. And I would say that if you're interested at all in sustainability, there are so many, broader and more niche areas and networks and organizations that you can plug into. But even if it's just general design, like IIDA, ASID, AIA, whatever, association, just getting involved, getting engaged, going to meetings. Like for me, I think, even 5 to 7 years ago, I would never have imagined that I'd know so many people doing such amazing work in the industry in fields and sectors that I myself have never worked in. And it's really just through engaging in professional associations, finding areas that, finding questions like this, like, oh, I'm having difficulty recycling carpet tile on this project, even though the manufacturer will take it back for free. Why is this still such a problem? And then starting to ask that question and figuring out who all is involved in, making that happen and bringing people together around that. So I think, getting engaged with organizations and asking questions, that would be my philosophical response is like really, really leaning into that connection and putting yourself out there. And even if you're feeling like you're not necessarily, offering a perfectly polished case study or project, but rather a challenge that you're grappling with, I guarantee you somebody else out there is grappling with that challenge. And that's where you'll find the best connection and, engagement and opportunities that you didn't even realize might have been available to you when you start to ask those questions and just get curious.
Yeah, I think I love what you shared because we all think we're the only person having certain questions or up against certain obstacles. But the reality is, oftentimes there's a whole network of people out there that are having similar passions around, say, sustainability or whatever it is that an individual is really passionate and interested in. So I love that answer. That feels great that is a community out there that we can be a part of. So Laurel, thank you for joining us on All Stills Tell Me More podcast and for sharing your design journey and wisdom, especially around sustainability and what we can do to kind of really help our planet.
My pleasure. Again, the honor is mine. Thank you so much, Kina, for having me.
Thanks again. Bye.
Thanks for joining us on Tell Me More. For more insights and stories, subscribe on Apple Podcast and Spotify, and connect with us on social @AllSteel. See you next time.